So, come in and grab a seat, folks. So was the Eagle staff are last to sit down, or ex-Eagle staff. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the penultimate session of the conference, or the ultimate block of sessions for the conference. Hopefully you've all had a very good day so far. We're going to finish off in this part of the conference talking about a topic which has been very, very popular recently across. We've heard it come up, the term smart cities come up in many places across the conference. And so we want to explore that a bit more, mostly by talking to people who are practitioners in this space. So it's not really a technology-focused session. We've got a few technology components in the session, this part one and part two, but more it's about speaking to the practitioners about what their interpretation of this smart city is. What is a smart city? How do you get one? Where do you buy them from? And why you want to have one of those. So we've actually got some great speakers with us today. So we've got, starting off with Michael Healy from Christchurch City Council, who may have some hot off the press information for us in terms of Christchurch's smart city journey. Then we're going to hear from Maurice Wills, Acting Geospatial Manager at Environment Canterbury, talking about the work they're doing there with their apps and data that are relevant in the smart city space, and I guess smart city in the wider sense. Then I'm going to ask Andreas from Esri to maybe share a little bit about what is Esri's perspective on a smart city. And I guess one of the questions I have, and he answered it a bit before in the plenary, was around smart city, digital twin, GIS. If you were drawing a Venn diagram, how would this thing look? What's the overlap, etc.? What's the role of this GIS thing you have, that all of you have in creating a smart city? The warning is I hadn't actually told Andreas about these slides until about 18 seconds ago, so that may be more of a discussion piece than a presentation. Maybe I can show a video. Yeah, from our company, from Dominic Taoli. That would be fantastic. Dominic's got some good work on that, so let's do that. Nice video about what we think about smart cities. And we'll take some questions on that too. That would be fantastic. Thanks, Andreas. And then we're looking at some technology stuff. So James from my team showing some BIM integration and also real time, two of the key elements, I guess, in having inputs into a smart city. And then we're going to ask Simon York from Oricon to talk about the cool work he's been doing with some augmented reality or virtual reality experiences, which you may have already seen in the expo yesterday and the day before. We'll hear a bit more about that this afternoon. We'll have a break. We'll have some tasty afternoon tea, hopefully some cream scones, things like that. And then we're going to come back and have a panel discussion. And we're going to have the panel discussion. We're going to have all of our presenters. We're going to augment that with Sean O'Dane from Wellington, who's come to join us today, which is fantastic. And we've got some questions, but we're going to have some time, hopefully, to take questions from this audience as well. We're then going to do another technical presentation, looking at ArcGIS Urban in the smart city. ArcGIS Urban has popped up in a few of the demonstrations we've seen in plenary and the 3D session. If you were there crossing the library just earlier, there was a fantastic work that Justin was doing across in Australia. So looking at urban rather, in the context of planning. Zorko, again from our team, looking at procedural generation and gaming engines. Some of the tech aspects there. And then we're going to get a guest presenter from Bevan from UAS, talking about some really cool technology they've developed to do some of the data capture work, which is, again, another key component in making these smart cities. Cool. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Michael Healy, who's the Smart Cities Programme Manager at Christchurch City Council. Please welcome Michael. Have a clicker.
Put on a timer because I have a tendency to talk and not stop. So I'll kick off what Scott alluded to just previously. We've just come from a council meeting, one of the last ones of the year, and we were going to our council with our new strategy. And I'm pleased to say they adopted it. So it's a culmination of a couple of years' work, so we're pretty happy today. So after facing the council this close to an election, I feel like this is a very friendly crowd in comparison. So in terms of who I am, just briefly before I go into about the program, my name is Michael Healy. I'm the Program Manager of Smart Christchurch program. I've been in the Smart City space for just over 3 years now. Prior to that, I was in continuous improvement for around 10 years, and I got to work on a lot of digital projects, a lot of those with a GIS component. So while I'm not a GIS expert by any stretch of the imagination, I have played nicely with a lot of GIS professionals over the years. In terms of the rest of my team, we've got Grace De Leon here, who's a city initiative lead on the side here. We've got Julianne Huey, who held the pen in our strategy. And then we've got Michael Shimmick, who's a data aggregator and visualizer. So he is probably the most akin to the professions in this room. So today, I'll go through, and we haven't got a huge amount of time, so it'll be pretty a helicopter view. We'll talk about the purpose, vision, and mission of what we do. Talk about our strategy, allude to some of the key elements of that. Go over some initiatives, again, pretty high level. And then I don't think we'll have time for feedback and thoughts, but who knows? I'm sure Morris is really keen to get up on the stage, so I better not hog it. In terms of our city's vision, the council vision, it's about making Christchurch a city of opportunity for all, open to new ideas, new people, new ways of doing things. So a city where anything is possible. Obviously, innovation, smart cities is a key part of that. In terms of our program, it's been going now for just over 6 years, and it started with my predecessor. It was a one-person show with a bit of money to find some tech and put it up a pole, basically. But over the years, she built a team. We built, a longer-term case for funding, and now we're a permanently funded team of around 4.5 people doing a lot of work across the organisation and wider city. Over that time, we've gone from maybe having a more tech focus to being people-centred in everything we do. We're starting a lot more citywide collaboration, whether that's with universities, with the local regional council, other cities, or council control companies. We're definitely moving in a direction where we're trying to take it up a level. Co-design is really important for us, so in terms of co-designing with the community, but also kind of our key stakeholders and customers. And then lastly, replication. We'll talk about some of these projects which we're very happy have been replicated in other parts of New Zealand and sometimes the world. And there's a lot of things we've done that we've learned from other cities in New Zealand and further afield. So just building in terms of about how we choose new initiatives, it can come from all directions. It can be sitting in a council meeting, getting grilled. It can be through, email. It can be in person. Any number of channels. We want to get a lot more structured about opening things up to the community in terms of, so we can open, the floodgate of ideas, but also make sure that we're incorporating a voice of the community right through our design process. Some of the key things we look at, often initiatives can hit more than one area, so often it's about creating a healthy environment, a more livable city, but in doing that you can collaborate with local innovators and in turn create a prosperous economy. So economic benefits don't have to be at the detriment of the environment and vice versa. We're looking for, symbiotic opportunities for people to partner with positive outcomes. So I'll get into one of our key projects over the last few years, which is EQRNet, so Seismic Resilience as a Service. And this kind of encapsulates our approach and has been one of the success stories of the last few years. So for people who may have been in Christchurch through the Canterbury earthquakes and may have experienced earthquakes in other parts of the country or the world, you'll know that when there's an aftershock or a main event, what happens in one neighbourhood can be very different to another. What happens on one side of the street can be very different. One building can stand and one building can fall. And we found after the Canterbury earthquakes with the aftershocks, we had a lot of situations where we didn't know if a building was safe to be in. To err on the side of safety, we abandoned our central city. Now the reality is we could have kept parts of it open if we had better information. We had libraries open that shouldn't have been open and buildings closed when they should have been open. So it cost the economy a lot of money, but also created a lot of stress for staff and the community. So with this project, we worked with a local company called Canterbury Seismic Instruments to put seismic sensors across the CBD initially, 10 of them, to work out what different intensity levels meant in different parts of the city. And then eventually we went from 10 right up to 150. So now what we've got is when an earthquake happens, within 2 minutes, we take the information from the 150 sensors And then we look at all of our buildings, and so like our main civic building just over there, we look at what building code it is, what the ground conditions are, and then very quickly we notify our building warden whether it's safe to be there, if there's been minor damage, or worst case scenario, if people need to get out of there. You can see some screenshots there just kind of displaying how we can kind of get that one on the bottom there is just showing the, I suppose, the capabilities of the building and how an event can, I suppose, go over those capabilities, and our building managers, as I said, will get that notification. Again, replication, a lot of places in New Zealand have issues with seismic events, most of them, apart from Northland maybe, and a lot of countries overseas. So we're working with CSI and other cities to see if we can spread this system around. Wellington currently has 100 of these in their CBD, from memory. You will have heard a lot about machine learning and AI, no doubt, in other sessions, but I thought I'd just talk about a couple of council-specific cases, which hopefully are of interest. One of them was around graffiti recognition. Now, this is something we've done in-house, where we had 20,000 photographs of graffiti, and we had a very small graffiti team trying to analyse it and put together case files on recidivist offenders. The fact is they couldn't keep up with the photos, we couldn't build case files for the police, and when offenders were caught, generally they were only able to be prosecuted for one event, so we're pretty limited in our ability to kind of intervene. We worked with our BI team and a local vendor to build smarts that will take the images coming in, analyse the signature of the graffiti, and then put together a case file. The intent isn't to put hundreds of kids into prison or to send them to make them bankrupt. The intent is, I suppose, to show them that we've got the evidence we need if we need to escalate things. And we're finding, working with the police, a lot of the times nothing further has to happen, and kids will desist, go do street art, or maybe take up other interests. Roof type and tree canopy analysis. Again, no doubt some of the people in this room have done similar things, but for our tree canopy, there's been massive urban intensification and a lot of concern about loss of canopy and the impact that has on heat islands, flooding events. So we worked with a local vendor, Orbica, to fully automate our analysis of tree canopy to the point now where we can run it as often as we can, new LiDAR and photography notwithstanding. Dog barking, that's quite a cool one. Previously, if someone complained about a dog barking, we would send an animal control officer who would leave a recording device, and then they would retrieve that and manually analyse it, taking hours to build a case file. Again, that's something that can be done in minutes using machine learning and AI. And aerospace challenge, and we've got UAS here and Woods who'll talk about how they were part of the aerospace challenge. But we love running challenges and events, whether it's GovHack or an aerospace challenge, to support kind of emerging talent. And one thing a city can do, it doesn't necessarily have a lot of money and it can move quite slowly, but it does give a living laboratory to startups. So hopefully that's a theme that you'll see coming out as we go through. 6 minutes left. I'm going to talk about a project that we're going to launch Friday. Hopefully we get some good media coverage, but it's around the use case being a couple of years ago, we had a lot of arson events, and prior to that in 2017 we had a major fire up in the Port Hills, which had enormous damage and effect on people's safety and well-being. Through that period, Grace thought that surely there must be technology being used that we can auto-detect fires at the earliest possible point and notify our fire and emergency staff. And so through her, hard work, we found out about a solution in Victoria that was a network of air quality sensors and thermal cameras that use that data to work out the earliest stages of fire and then automatically notify emergency services. As well as that environmental data about pollen count, temperature, wind. So for recreational areas like the area that we picked in the end, very useful through normal times just for recreational users. But when those emergencies happen, it enables us to notify park staff and our fire and emergency. So we've got 5 of these in Bottle Lake, which for those of you not local is a plantation just north of Christchurch that's really heavily used by recreational users. And we've got a further one going in there and 3 up in the Port Hills. Excited about the one on the Port Hills because it'll mean we'll be able to check the weather before going mountain biking. But that's not the only reason we're putting up there, I promise. Another project that, unfortunately, we haven't got a huge amount of time, but I encourage you after this to look up smartview.ccc.govt.nz. Now, SmartView is a web app that is the baby of Michael Shimmick over there. He's been working on for about 5 years now. Started off with 10 data sets in a reasonably fugly casing, and it's expanded to about 70 different data sets, and I think it's looking pretty sharp. But it's a platform that basically people can interrogate all sorts of data. It can be quite practical, where a drinking fountain is, or street art. It could be how many cyclists we have, how lime scooters are being used in the city. But it's got a wealth of data there, so hopefully it'll be of interest to you. And given your profession, it'll be really good to get ideas how to make it better, and if there's any data sets you think we should add too. Again, just a few screenshots there. Where possible, we like to use nationally available data sets. So from LAWA, we get water quality. From ECAN, we get bus positioning. So in real time, you can see where any bus is on the network. And a few other things like fruit trees, really popular. Again, Michael's idea was to put council-owned fruit trees on a map, and which we did, and our foraging community went bananas. We don't have any banana trees, of course, we're too far south. But it was a real success story. But it kind of shows what we try to do, which is experiment, take risks, put it out there in the public realm, and people will vote with their fingers and thumbs. But that was one that really came off. In terms of accessibility and safety, this has been a big focus for us, and it's a big focus of our new strategy. We work closely with our accessibility community to work on projects that will make it easier for people to interact with their city and to get them to explore. So whether it's finding toilets that colitis and Crohn's sufferers can use when they're out and about, whether it's enabling people to crowdsource where they're having a bad experience, and then that can flow through to council and also to other users. We're also looking at safety, reporting mechanisms where, again, we can crowdsource where people are feeling unsafe. There's a two-part benefit to that. Users can find out where other people feel safe and unsafe, but also council, police, and other strategic partners can use that data for making better decision-making. Climate change and sustainability, it's been a big theme of this conference, and no doubt a big concern for a lot of people in this room. But a lot of our projects do have an environmental or sustainability component. eClean Bioreactor is a case where we've worked with a local startup, Nari Scartosi in that photo there. She had an idea of using natural microbes and processes to remove phosphates, nitrates, and other pollutants from river water. So we funded 2 of the units you can see there. They're pretty big, at the headwaters of the Otakaro Avon and in Wigram Basin. So again, that's given her exposure, learnings, and created a whole bunch of opportunities, and we're very hopeful that she's a huge international success, and maybe she remembers us when she's a multimillionaire. River monitoring in real time is one of our projects that's underway at the moment. We're pretty excited by that, and again, we work closely with ECAN and other kind of strategic partners on that. And lastly, when you go to SmartView, you'll see on the emissions dashboard that we've developed to track how we're going against our targets. Quickly going through, we'll talk a lot about digital twins, so I'm not going to dwell on that, but I will say that we've had a proof of concept. We've played in the space, and to be quite frank, I've spent 3 years wringing my hands wondering what the right way forward is. Things like this are really useful ways to kind of share ideas, find out from other cities what they're doing, and kind of use our collective genius to kind of direct us in the right direction. So I'm hopeful we've got a big year ahead of us in terms of really solidifying what we want to do. Have we got any gamers in the room here? Esports is big, and we're supporting it in a couple of different ways. One, supporting libraries to have school leagues with a plan to have regional finals and hopefully bring in international competitions in. And also making sure that our facilities like the new stadium, there we go, give me a minute more, like the new stadium are future fit. So we've got fibre laid, we've got the structures in place for lighting for big esports events. So hopefully when that stadium eventually opens, we're going to have some of the biggest events in the esports world there. And this time next year, the Innovation Expo will hopefully be in this facility around exactly 365 days away. Or about, yeah, thereabouts. So the Innovation Expo we last ran in 2019. It's been delayed 3 times because of COVID, and it was going to be here. You guys pipped us to it. But that's going to bring 100 exhibitors, 10,000 members of the public and industry and people like yourselves, along with a bunch of plenary sessions running in parallel this time next year. So I'd encourage you, if you're local, please attend when it does run. If you're not local, come down, and also let us know if any of your companies want to exhibit. We're very keen to talk. And with that, and about a minute over, I will say adieu. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michael. Okay. Let's see what my Alt-Tab skills are like. Oh. That's where I'm going after this conference. Okay, before I introduce my next speaker, I just wanted to realise there was apart from not telling Andreas to do a presentation, the other thing I forgot to mention was at this event, and Michael's comment reminded me, this session is actually a hybrid event in two senses. One of them is that the session which Michael spoke about, that innovation, the expo, which will be here, was going to be here before and was postponed. So when we heard it was postponed, we had 2 attempts at bringing it to fruition. It didn't work out. We saw there was so many cool components of that, we didn't want to miss out. So when we spoke to Michael at Christchurch and Morris at ECAN, we said, can we pull some of the elements of that together and have it in a session within our conference? So you can have a conference within a conference, even if you didn't know you were that. So if it's not all geospatial, we think it's a really rich set of stories that connect back and with that location element at its heart. The second hybrid part is, this is again, you may not know this, we're actually being joined by people who are not in this room. We've got a number of attendees joining us from Christchurch, from wider New Zealand, and actually from overseas today. So a big shout out to those people. Hi, there's a camera at the back. Hi. Hi from Christchurch. So not just people in the room, we've actually got a wider audience on this topic. I do want to pass back to someone who is in the room, and that's Morris Wills. Morris Wills is the acting geospatial team lead at Environment Canterbury. Many of you probably know him if you're a Christchurch or Canterbury local. And I'm going to ask him to speak a little bit about the work they're doing with the Canterbury Maps there.
Putting people's faces to the costumes they had on last night.
It's quite hard. Yeah. There you go. Pass the clicker there.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah, so I'm here to talk to you about Canterbury Maps, Smart City and Greater Christchurch. You know, I've been trying to think what a smart city is, so I've pulled this definition from online. A smart city is one that uses information and communication technologies to increase operational efficiency, share information with the public, and improve both citizen welfare and the quality of government services. I wasn't born in Christchurch, to tell you the truth. I was born in Jakarta, Indonesia, back in the days when it was a bit autocratic. So I'm very, I champion openness and democracy. So, yeah, that's what we're all about. Okay. Our mission with Canterbury Maps is provides free access to maps, records, information, and data from the local government councils in the Canterbury region. To enable smart governance, we obviously have a lot of imagery and LiDAR data collection. If you've gone on recently, you would have seen the release of the Christchurch high-density LiDAR, 62 billion classified points, available on LDS, OpenTopo, and viewable on 3D on Canterbury Maps. So we're all about big data, all about open data, bringing citizens closer to the science, to the planning and to the engineering for better engagement, and so they have confidence in the decisions that affect them, and bringing that historical context and information in. People interact with our portal through APIs. We're moving into the 3D mesh space, and more of our data sets are going into cloud-hosted data. And obviously in the future, microservices that are scalable. Oh, this has an animation. So this was our user base back in 2016 when we launched. It was kind of born out of the Christchurch earthquake experience, trying to get data sets to have that inter-organisation response. So we thought one data portal where people can get it all was a good idea. So these circles mean in 2016 we started with 188,000 sessions and 79,000 users, and this year we're tracking on to about 1.5 million sessions and 300,000 users. I do keep a track of that stats just against population. Find it quite interesting. So this is not a Canterbury Maps example, but I talked to somebody at Stats before, hopefully they're in the room. So we help both urban and rural communities evolve. We're interested in protection, restoration, regeneration, and our climate change response. Climate change is here, it's affecting us already. Wettest July on record. And the national policy statement for urban development, obviously, urbanisation and intensification. What does that mean? Well, let's have a look. Here's Christchurch. Does this have a pointer? Maybe not. It's okay. So here's the district planning zones across the Canterbury Plains. You can see how big Christchurch city is, but we have communities across the plains in the Selwyn district, in the centre, and up in the Waimakariri in the north. So a lot of our population has gone out to these satellite towns because of the Christchurch earthquakes. A lot of rezoning, a lot of repairs have had to happen in the city. But as we plan to grow, and as these satellite towns grow, what does that mean for soils, for example? So here's New Zealand Research Institute land use classification classes. So these are highly valuable soils in the green. And it was interesting listening to Andreas the other day. You don't just go build the digital twin just for the sake of it. You're thinking about what problems it helps to solve. So I thought, well, let's just have a look at what the hydrology is going on here, just to explain. So we have the Waimakariri to the north, and the Avon and Heathcote, Ihutai estuary down the lower end here. So we've got big estuary and wetlands near the coastal parts of the city. Let's go back to 1860. If you remember Takarai's examples of the 1860 black maps. So here it is digitised as vector layer. So the blue here, you can see where it was actually wetland, water bodies. So just how much of the city is naturally sitting on, quite high groundwater. In terms of climate change, our coastal communities are going to be impacted. This should play through. Depending on the scenario, amount of sea level rise and what year. Big shout out to Christchurch City and Tonga Taylor on this app, I think. Definitely look up. If you've seen the movie, don't look up. So how geography and geography can help? We make the links and connections to the networks. What's the tree? These are just some examples. The tree coverage, impervious surfaces, flooding, coastal inundation, and building levels. Just want to show you this example. So this was liquefaction after the Christchurch earthquakes. Moderate to severe. And if you've seen the imagery session earlier, this is, the liquefaction at part of the city. So sitting on a high groundwater table. And the resolution is not great, but in this application we have probably searched all the EQC claims. So when you next look for your house in Christchurch, maybe go and have a look. here's another great app from CC and Tonga Taylor. So this is just blew my mind. Climate change affecting liquefaction. So let's have a look, depending on earthquake intensity and groundwater level. Is that playing through? Yes, it is. Groundwater at 2 metres above 2019 average. This could represent winter conditions in conjunctions to the effects of climate change.
What you're saying is my house is not
No, the cliff might fall down.
So why keep historic imagery for a start? Well, it shows through time, intensification, different land use. I believe there's some rezoning going on in Sydenham, going from, light industrial back to mixed residential. And just how the city grew. Just skip to the next one. So this is our portal at this stage. So this is our landing page. You've got the 3D viewer, map viewer, open data sets if you want to go straight to the data, property search on the front page, and we have our news items. So I just want to show you this example. This is the 3D viewer loading. All the data is hosted on ArcGIS Online. So the imagery comes in, 3D data sets, and there's the point cloud LiDAR. Not bad. Pretty quick download. Pretty quick speeds. And not to forget, there is a city underneath the city, if you're thinking about Three Waters, how they connect to all the above ground features. So here's an example of the connections under the harbour, between the coastal communities. In the environmental space, we talk about catchment by catchment planning these days. And just to talk back to the rezoning intensification, we have online the listed land use register. So here's Te Pai and different activities that was on this site over time. You would have seen this example already, but flooding across the plains is a problem. It's so flat, the meandering rivers, they don't meander in here. They're quite braided, so there's no natural banks. So the Waimakere used to flood Victoria Square there, waist deep. We do have about 600 data sets, so benchmarks, planning, survey benchmarks. And we utilise the power of both what's on Canterbury Maps itself and ArcGIS Online, so people can grab any other, stats data sets, LINS data sets. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Morris.
Sorry, it was a bit sobering. Did I bring you to the room down?
I wondered if there's anything to worry about in that previous uses of this land. I couldn't see if there's anything nasty there that we should be worried about. Andreas, you want to come up and plug in? So this is the unformed part of the presentation. It's my fault entirely. But what Andreas is going to do is talk a little bit about that question we had before, and which we'll come back to. a little bit those terms like GIS and smart cities and digital twin. How do they actually relate to each other? And if you've got a GIS, have you got a smart city, or do you need one of those? And I guess what we saw from Morris there was all those rich layers of information in that classic GIS layering up in comparison. What does that mean in terms of the term smart city? So I'm going to clear out of here. And actually, if you want to just plug in there, perhaps I can just do a switch for you. Number one. Yep. They're too small to fit. Just one here. Oh, that won't work. We're building the presentation as we speak.
All right, good. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk again. Yeah, I mean, we have heard a lot about smart cities and digital twins over the course of the conference. I think the main thing we need to keep in mind is that it's not about technology and data, but it's about the vision, right? The vision and the people gather and drive this thing forward. Yeah, and also thinking about how we need to do things differently as we used to do, right? There's a whole new process in place, and data and technology does mean that we have to change our way of working. This is more a technical look at this stuff, right? And I was presenting this in the plenary just to get an idea about what a digital twin is with respect to a smart city, or the other way around. And when I was researching, I found this actually a nice picture here, which demonstrates this a little bit. And while I was browsing through this, I found this pretty interesting, that you can actually divide this into these different tiers, right? And the tier below, the lowest tier, is more of this building up this thing, building up a 3D model, just a pure representation of what we see outside, right? Which may be in 2D and 3D and whatever. And when we look at the smart city, which is more of a concept, a state which a city can reach, right? Then we can compare it to actions, right? So the first level, the lowest tier, is maybe the sea level. How cool! So the sea level, right? So where you see things, where you visualize things. This could be the virtual city, right? Which we all started earlier, like 10 years ago, creating this 3D representation. And then when it comes to connecting these assets with, sensors, with data from the outside, then, it turns into a thinking process. So we turn into a smart city, or the city turns into a smart state, let's say it this way. Yeah. And then when we start looking at, piping the data back into reality so that we can get stuff done, then the smart city turns maybe in a responsive city, or maybe in an autonomous city. I don't know. It's weird, but you never know, right? And the digital twin, on the other side, is actually a tool that supports a smart city in various ways. There are more tools to support a smart city, but when it comes to a digital twin, it is one pillar or one tool in the toolbox of becoming a smart city, right? And when we talk about smart cities later in detail, then we will recognize this. But in terms of the digital twin, you can think about it in a maturity of steps. You are creating this thing up. You build up a model. You go out, scan, and you have this model inside of your application. And then again, you connect it with real-time data, making this link. And we have seen a couple of things. I think Gerd showed some cool stuff yesterday, right? And then the model runs, right? It's a running twin. And then once the twin gets, smart enough to actually use the data and make all those relationships, right? And then you can actually simulate stuff, can connect back to the reality. And so we are talking about an automated twin, right? So this, at least, was for me a good kind of way of thinking through these two concepts. Two things. One is the concept, the other thing is the tool. I'm not sure if this is helpful, but for many things, for many people, it's like, okay, these are buzzwords. How do they relate to each other? What is it? One is the concept of getting to a smart state, and digital twin is the tool we might be using for several of the use cases and problems we need to solve. And with that, maybe, I don't know if that works, but I would like to run this video. I don't know if you have seen this. Is it working with sound? Good. So this is my colleague, Dominic Tarolli. I mean, it's probably not the best start of a video, but I couldn't go further to the beginning. But anyway, it's more important what he says than how he looks. Sorry, Dominic, but I probably let it run. Huh?
Our cities are facing
No, it's not.
technology can really help to bring people together, cities smarter. I'm Dominic Tarolli, the Director of Smart Cities at Esri. The fundamental purpose of a city is basically to bring people together. It's not only about the city, it's also about the experience that you have in those cities. At Esri, we have an integrated approach to smart cities with 4 pillars. Pillar number 1 is a smart city starts with smart planning. How do we build a city that everybody's involved and engaged and connected to it? Pillar number 2 are good services. So how can we be operational and effective to the people who call it home? Number 3 is the civic inclusion. And we really think the more people are engaged and the more they will collaborate, the better the solution and the smarter the city at the end of the day. And then number 4 is data-driven performance. So if we get all that data, bring it into one bucket, and then visualize it so that everybody can understand it, that really helps us to increase quality of life for everybody. So transportation is really an important topic in a city. So how do we get around? How are goods be transported in a city? Well, what's the current challenges? Well, what's the current traffic looking like? What's the current weather? And our customers are saving a lot of time and also money using the power of location intelligence. And we think the more we can basically use that intelligence of the masses to really shape a decision, that really leads to better results in the end. So the smart cities of the future are those who are connected and engaged with the people who call it home.
I'm well prepared, so I show this slide here. Just to okay. Why is it different now? Let's do like this. Okay, so now we had the comparison, digital twin and smart city. We have heard from Dominic what we think about a smart city, right? And now I bring up the definitions, and this was more or less the conclusion out of my plenary speech, and also the order of how I presented those definitions. So you have this high-level concept. The highest level is the concept of a smart city, right, which is the concept of integrated urban development by introducing digital innovations. And the tool, or one of those digital innovations, could be a digital twin, right? Which is the virtual representation of the real world, including physical objects, processes, relationships, and behaviors. And last but not least, or maybe for us the most important thing, is the underlying GIS system. And we have heard a couple of things last days, and it's always about location, right? And this is what GIS brings to the table, besides dealing with the data, analyzing the data, preparing the data, and having this whole ecosystem of tools available for you to handle these kind of things, right? And location is the key for everything, right? And so this piles up nicely, and at the end of the day, you fuel your smart city with the help of GIS that enables digital twins. And I think with that, I leave it like this, and we will have a discussion probably later on, right? Good, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thanks again, Andreas. And again, apologies for the somewhat ad hoc presentation that I foisted upon you. But we are going to come back to Andreas and all of the speakers to have a really, I think, rich conversation around some of the topics we're covering here and the interplay between the different fields and disciplines. The next thing I want to pass on to is a technical presentation. I'm going to pass over to James from my team, who's going to take us through some of the more technical components that could be feeding in, whether it's that Andreas talked about the intelligence, bringing those feeds of information in. There's a few aspects and components we have to help bring that information in more easily, much more easily than we could have done a few years ago, as well as the integration between systems. So that BIM, which drives a lot of the real rich data around the buildings and built environment, some improvements and enhancements we've had in that space from a tech point in the last little while. So come up here, James. You're just there. I can switch you across. Slides first? Okay, here we go. All yours.
Thank you. Cool. So it's been a lot of concepts so far, I guess, in this presentation, and I've got, I guess, two products, technical products I want to show you. The first of which is connecting those worlds, so GIS and BIM. And GeoBIM is the product that helps to start doing this, alongside some other tools within the system. I guess GeoBIM is a fundamentally connecting to cloud environments. So we have our online environment where we start to publish up single sources of truth for GIS data. Autodesk has the same. So they have file management systems where they can all work on designs together. Now, we obviously have applications where we publish up all of our GIS data, things like Canterbury Maps that Morris was showing earlier, where we have all of our rich information for our city. Now, often this is just kind of showing the where, what is there, alongside some pretty powerful attribute information, I'm sure. But why not combine two worlds where they have specialist tools? They obviously capture a lot of information when they're building these buildings. Why not use that data in our own worlds? And you know what, I might skip this. There's a few things that are new, but if you're not familiar with the tool, it's all new. But things like open data integration, things called IFC files. Essentially, that's just an open data standard, I suppose, so you can start to work with a lot more different softwares. I won't go into too much detail, but I'll go into a demonstration instead. Cool. I'll take a seat for this one if you don't mind. Cool. That's going to work. There we go. Cool. So we've got Christchurch here. And what I want to start to do is start to build out, I guess, that idea of a digital twin, or the tool is a digital twin idea of a smart city that Andreas was just alluding to. And digital twins kind of start with a layer of data in terms of reality capture. So things like imagery, high resolution imagery in this case, that starts to build that foundation of where things are. We can then layer in things like 3D information, so 3D data in this case derived from LiDAR. It starts to give us an accurate representation of the real-life 3D models here in Christchurch. And obviously, we all know GIS, so we can start to incorporate other layers of information, so things like utilities around the city here, to start to build up that picture of a digital twin. I can't remember which layer it was, Andreas, but I think it was layer 2, which is just when you start to bring in that infrastructure information. So bringing in things like building scene layers, which are GIS representations of that really complex BIM data. In this case, we have Tapai here. We also have Turonga there in the background as well. And we can start to layer in any BIM models that we might have around the city into our scenes to start adding that next layer of complexity to our digital twin. Now that's just those GIS representations. Again, we have more down the street here in High Street. And theoretically, we can start to build out a whole city's worth if we have that data. Where GeoBIM comes in is it starts to connect the GIS representations of our data, but also brings in the source of truth of where that's coming from, and all that rich attribute information that's sitting behind the windows, what specifications are they, how do I replace this, how do I demolish this, things like that. So GeoBIM allows you to do that by interacting with that GIS information, by simply interact with some of the features here. Hopefully a link will pop up, yes. I can open up that right-hand side, and that's basically linking into that Autodesk cloud world. Essentially, that gives me all of the same information in the source view in this case, and directly linking to that feature where I can then, if I'm a contractor or someone who's coming on site to find out, well, do some work essentially, I have all the information I need and specifications that I wouldn't otherwise get otherwise. And we're all spatial people, right? I don't really like going through file formats or file systems and trying to find the information I need. I'm definitely a spatial person, so I like to be there, see what I'm looking at, and then access that data that way. Cool, so that was GeoBIM. I might as well stay down here for the slides there. The next information I want to add, or next product I want to show, is ArcGIS Velocity. I don't actually have a title on there for it. That's all right. So that next layer of information that Andreas was alluding to is the tier where you start to add in things like IoT sensors, capturing real-time information. And Velocity, I guess, is the application where you can start to ingest that data, so coming from various different IoT sensors, analyze that data on the fly. So as it's coming in, say you've got some stream data, and that stream data is going above a certain threshold. I want to then get notified of it being above that threshold. And here's just a quick idea of what that actually looks like in a very high-level architectural view. So you have sensors on the left-hand side that could then go directly to Velocity, or it can go through a platform that conglomerates all that information into one and then sends it to ArcGIS. There's things like, there's 3 different formats essentially. One's directly the feed, so bringing that feed directly into a GIS format. There's a real-time analytic, so if you want to change that feed a bit and actually get some data out of it. And there's also the ability over time as this data accumulates to start to do analytics on that. And of course, you're all aware, there's a whole range of different applications in the ArcGIS system to start sharing out this information. So I can incorporate it back into that scene I just showed you and show you what exactly is going on in the city. Yeah, I just had some examples here for infrastructure monitoring, things like mitigating loss, proximity analysis, so you say you have some sensors on some vehicles and they can't be within a certain area of a dangerous facility, for example, or vice versa. And things like predictive maintenance. So as I start to accumulate more data on my assets, I can start to assess what the state of them is at any one point. And I have 2 little videos for you. So the top left-hand side is some indoor monitoring. So if I have indoor sensors and run that through Velocity to then give me an output on my map, I can then start to view in real time who is in my facility. The analytics side of that would be where have they been, how long were they there for, what part of the facility they're using. So you can start to answer questions like that. And on the bottom right, I think it's an example Gert showed yesterday, but being able to bring in real-time buses and things like that to both bring in that data from sensors, but then if you want to do some analytics on it, such as is it traveling too slowly, has it been in a certain location for a certain too long a period, and start to notify me through different applications that way. Yeah, that's all I had for you on the technical side today, and I'll pass back to Scott. One or two.
And just give me a second. Just a note to those who are joining us online, if you could turn your microphones and cameras off on your end, just so it doesn't disrupt the other folks. There'll be a few messages coming through. I think that cameras and mics were on for the folks online, so if you could turn those off if you're joining us remotely, that would be fantastic. Thank you. Cool. Okay, so our last speaker for part one is Simon York. So Simon is lead consultant in innovation at Oricon, and you would have seen him either on his paddleboard or maybe with the other cool device they had in the expo over the last couple of days. And I'm going to pass across to Simon to talk about this virtual paddleboarding experience, which is fun but also probably valuable. So pass across to Simon.
Cool, thanks, Scott. So I lead up innovation for Oricon New Zealand, and in that space, basically it's more in the applied innovation area. So looking to figure out how we use the application of emerging technologies to change how we do the way we work. Focusing mainly on three areas of, firstly, how do we capture the world around us more efficiently? Secondly, how do we improve the design process through better analytics and better analyzation of that data and improving the automation of design? And finally, the improving how we engage with information. So moving away from the old world of 2D drawings and 2D screens to how do we engage people into the real world or into virtual worlds to help portray designs better. So for the last 15 years, our team has been focusing on the use of game engines, really trying to push the boundaries of what we can do to change how we design and how we interact with design. And that can be everything from improving internal workflows, basically building tools for our own engineers to change how they design, allowing them to do virtual site visits or even go up to a cliff in virtual reality and start doing measurements that they would normally have to do from a dangerous location on site. But also improving how we engage with our clients to improve better solutions for them. And that can lead right through to building tools for them to help engage with their community as well. And there's been a bit of a theme in the first couple of talks today talking about the Christchurch earthquake. So just for those that aren't from Christchurch or aren't aware of what the Avon River is, the Avon Otakaro River, it's right outside here, it comes past us, and links out to the ocean. Now, when the earthquakes hit, this area now is the Avon River corridor, but for the last 10 years it's been more commonly known as the red zone. And it's all the area of the Christchurch city that was affected by the earthquake, and they had to remove the houses, and it's deemed not purpose-built for residential. So going back a few years, this land was under the ownership of LINZ and a governing body, Regenerate Christchurch, that came together. And they reached out to us with this idea of how do we engage the public in the story of what we're going to have to do to this red zone area. They came to us with these sort of sketches and said, we want to create some video fly-throughs, some imagery to help really convey to them what could be possible with this and get their feedback. but this was around about 2017, and it was when we really wanted to start pushing the boundaries of what was possible with game engines, more specifically the Unreal Engine game engine. So instead of doing the old sort of pretty standard visualization work, we said, well, what if we just build everything out inside a game engine? It's more common these days, you'll see a lot more of it, but back then it was fairly new. And we built out a lot of tools to start automating this process for us. And a lot of that was building tools that would pull in LiDAR and pull in any other sort of information we had and start automating the process of the design for us. And more importantly, building out libraries of New Zealand native plants with smarts that understood where and how they'd grow, what sort of slopes they grow on, how close to each other they grow. And this removes that need for someone to manually sit there and model this out. So basically, once we've got all these rules in place, we can just let the thing start planting itself effectively. And because of the use of game engines, everything's real time. Again, it's pretty commonplace these days, but back then it was quite new. And this idea that to create a visual fly-through or just some rendered stills, in the past you'd have to set your computer away rendering for a day or more to be able to just get like a minute video out. And as soon as someone said, oh, can we just move that tree slightly or the camera slightly, it was like, well, yeah, come back in another day and we'll show you the video. But everything you're seeing here is all real time on the screen as we're working. And that means that we can sit there with the landscape architects or anyone else and have it as an engaging process with us as we design. So the imagery you see here, again, it's not rendered images. This is just screenshots as you're working. So it also means that these sort of fly-through videos that we can produce, again, if someone says, can we change the camera angle slightly or the time of day, you just change that and rerun and it's instant. So the power of game engines was really changing how we did our work. But a bigger factor of why we wanted to build it in a game engine was because even though they came to us with this idea of still images or just videos, we had this bigger idea in the back of our minds that what if we build an engaging process for you? Those still images they came to us with showed people on kayaks and people on bikes engaging with the space. So we went back and said, well, now that we've got it in a game engine, why don't we just build out the physics to be able to do that for you? So we built out, to start with, a VR kayak system, complete with all the physics for paddling. And this meant that we could then stick people on a kayak in VR and have them engage with the design. And because it's all a live, real-time system, you could have someone kayaking along while someone's still designing, and basically from the kayak you could make updates and point out where you wanted things moved around. So spring forward a few years, the land last year was handed over to the council. It's now under council ownership. And they reached out to us with a similar sort of challenge. How do we move things forward? So this is sort of 4 or 5 years on. What's available now? How do we tell the story better? And how do we sort of engage people with the story of the river? And you would have from the Canterbury Maps earlier as well, we were able to reach into that sort of data and get an understanding of what's happened over time. And we, together with the council, came up with this idea of what if we tell the story of the history of the river? So not only building a single model, but build 5 models. So through history, from the 1700s, the 1800s, just pre-earthquake, modern day today, and then what it could look like in 100 years' time in the future. So we dug through all the data with the help of the council and everyone else to pull out every little bit of information we could find about the history. So everything from all the LiDAR information of the change over time, digging through old photos and old maps that we could find, the sort of thing T-Radar would be quite happy with, to try and really figure out what's happened, what it was like back then, along with bringing the cultural aspect of what sort of equipment was used for fishing, because the river was a great source of food at the time and also a food exchange, and all the sort of other cultural aspects that I really wanted to feature. And what we decided to do was centre this around a sort of a key piece of the river. Now, those from Christchurch would have recognised this bridge. It's the Medway Street Bridge. It became quite a key piece in the media because of the way it warped during the earthquakes. So this is, if anyone got to try the paddleboard yesterday or has seen it before, this is where you actually start on the paddleboard. And you can see this bridge, and then what we did, because we modelled up the exact replica of it, That bridge is now sitting along the bank, so you get to see it there as well. We modelled out all these sorts of aspects. So this is the sort of that 1700s era, the 1800s, which we can also automatically, again, the beauty of game engines, you can easily add a sepia finish to it and instantly finish it like that. And a lot of interactive features as well along the river. So we've got things like trout and whitebaits swimming around under you, so you can interact with it. And just like the kayak, we added the physics for a paddleboard system, which allows you to hop on that paddleboard and start paddling down the river. And we designed a virtual paddle there that has a button on it, and as you're paddling along, you just press the button, and it'll cycle through those time periods for you. Now, for those that have tried VR and don't like it, there's a few around. There's people that just can't handle it, either eyesight issues or they get nausea. What we did was we decided to work with the council on this idea that, well, what if we design a system that is VR, but can also work without the headset? So we've designed it in a way that allows a full wraparound screen system, so you get the surround aspect, and you can use it without the headset, so that we're ensuring anyone can use it. Did anyone try it yesterday? Anyone in the room? Michael did, of course. Sweet. And again, a lot of these are seen as potential like toys, but really the key aspect of this is the idea of being able to engage people, to go, again, like beyond a piece of paper with a drawing on it, or beyond a screen that's in 2D. The ability to put someone in a design and have them paddle along and actually experience what it could be like in the future. The other thing I didn't mention is we've also allowed in that 100-year time frame that sea level rise that you were talking about. So you really get to see what sort of changes happen over time. So again, a lot of these things, some people think are gimmicks, but really they're a great way of communicating. You put a plan in front of someone, and a lot of people don't know what that means. You put them into an experience like this, and it's a bit hard to say that you don't appreciate what's going to change. So, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Sam. It's pretty cool.
I missed the chance to actually get that. When would be the next place that paddleboard will be back on display, Simon, if people want to do it?
You have to ask Michael and Grace.
I have to ask Michael or Grace. This could be a good question for a Q&A, right?
Well, the plan is to put it in the library at this stage, so people will be able to go along and, yeah.
Awesome, cool. Hey, thanks again, Simon, that was awesome. Hey, we do have a few minutes now before we break for afternoon tea for some Q&A. So we're going to take some questions. For anyone who's presented so far, happy to take questions from the audience. We do have some runners, right runners, who have been training all day for this moment. And we have microphones at the back. So you're going to go and grab those 2 mics. Cool. Any questions for Andreas, for Simon, for Morris, or for Michael from what you've seen so far this afternoon? Oh, sorry, I'm looking the wrong direction. Sam.
Can you hear me all right? Yep. I had a question for, it might kind of sit across a couple of the presenters, but maybe more on James' end around the actual data governance and data management of the content you're throwing to the GeoBIM application. Do you have any kind of insights or revelations that you've had while experiencing the software that make a slightly different experience from, say, some of the other Esri Suites products?
So you're more saying around the data security?
Yeah, kind of like how do you manage the volumes of data coming through Velocity, for example? Are you kind of packaging it up and aggregating it for future analysis, or are you just kind of letting it stream through and then stream out?
I've got it, Mike, thank you. Yeah, good question. So in terms of velocity itself, the data stream coming in, it's going to be largely based on the sensor that you have. There are, I guess, limits on how much data you can store, but you can choose, I guess, how long you keep it for and how long you want to archive it for. If you do want to keep it, you can have other cloud repositories, I guess, cheaper places to put it. But yeah, I guess that's really up to you. In terms of the number of things coming in, again, it can scale. It's all built on ArcGIS Online. So basically, if you want lots and lots of streams, you get more. Take from that what you will. But does that answer your question, roughly? Sorry.
Thank you.
If it's about the scaling of it, then I guess there's different tiers. We recognise that the input feeds come in different volumes, from thousands of inputs per second to a bump or a bleep every few minutes. So there's different tiers, but the top tier scales pretty well. Any other questions for any of our panelists or presenters? Just here. It's a race.
It's really just a question for Michael or Maurice. I just wondered, when it comes to dealing with data sources from other agencies or other data sources, have you run into many challenges, and is there any learnings there around how to interoperate with different agencies?
We'll do a two-pronged approach on this. Have we had issues? Yes. Luckily, I mean, one of the great things about having a technical expert within the team is we've got a number of ways we can consume data, from the ideal way of consuming, fit for purpose API, to working out how to get data from a PDF that's stuck in your document management system. So I suppose we've encountered all sides. Generally, we find agencies and certainly like ECAN is a great partner in terms of providing data, but we work with, those national bodies. And generally, it's pretty good. But sometimes there has been reticence about, I suppose, people being a little bit nervous about getting their data, like Orion was one of them, in terms of power use for Christchurch City out in the public space. And it can take a while before we can, get the agreement. But I suppose the thing is, it's an ongoing conversation, and sometimes it's a tit for tat. We're trying to get surf data, which I haven't got to date, but that's on a commercial site. But I mean, we could show high-level data and then put people through to a commercial site, which benefits both parties. So we try to look at the symbiotic kind of opportunities, and different channels can be pathways into other channels. So generally, it's just a matter of negotiating.
On the interoperability side, I guess, ArcGIS does a good job on being so open, but we do have tool sets out there that help us, FME and things like that. So I just want to mention metadata, because that's so crucial. As you capture the data set and you're sharing it out, what's it fit for purpose for? Is the user's goals and an analysis that they want to undertake, does it fit for how the data was captured? So that metadata is just so important. Does that answer it?
Thank you. Cool. Question at the back there, Harry.
Perhaps just a quick follow-up on that for Michael. Just wondering if there's any policies, I guess, on whether vendors have to comply by data interoperability standards. So your seismic sensors, you can consume that data, whether it's through velocity or something else, alongside the fire sensors, and have a centralized platform, and whether you've had any success or challenges getting vendors to agree to standards.
I suppose we've probably learnt the hard way, that you have to specify in those commercial agreements and those conversations, there's a certain expectation. We've had cases like, previously and the wider council about having to pay for our own data to get that back. That's a pretty lousy place to be, and obviously we've learned from that. But yeah, we try to be as clear as possible when we're engaging with our vendors, that the expectation is that may be fine that you have a lovely bespoke dashboard, but we want the API feed. So it's all about having control of your own data. So,
thank you. Any more questions on that topic or other topics from what you saw so far this afternoon? No? Oh, one from Ryan at the back.
I guess I'll point this one to Andreas, but I'm happy for anyone to give their opinion. can we have a smart city without a digital twin underneath it?
Just Andreas there.
I guess yes. I mean, what I was showcasing is, breaking it down to smaller chunks of twins or dedicated twins for certain workflows. And when you let the time come into the game, right, into the equation, then over time, you most likely have many, many twins that tie up into a big twin. It's a similar approach when you build up a 3D city model, right? You start off with this first building in town, right? And everyone looks at this particular building and says, wow, right? And then, another one pops up, another one pops up, another one pops up. And by the end of the day, you have a whole city model. So I can imagine that this will happen, but it really depends on the use cases, the money, the negotiation. I don't know what it will be at the end of the day, but I would say yes.
Okay.
Cool, thank you. Okay, I think we'll break now for afternoon tea. Thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you to you. Thank you to our online folks. Online, no afternoon tea, unfortunately. Sorry about that. We are going to come back here shortly. So back in the room for part 2, where we'll start with a panel discussion covering some of those topics we spoke about just now. Thank you.